There is a moment in every story when the noise quiets down, when the world pauses just long enough for a voice that has always been there to finally be heard. This is one of those moments. Not loud, not dramatic in the way headlines like to shout, but steady, grounded, and unmistakably human. When people talk about Elon Musk, they usually talk about rockets tearing through the sky, electric cars gliding silently down highways, bold tweets, risks, failures, comebacks, ambition that seems too big for one lifetime. But behind all of that motion, behind the speed and spectacle, there is something softer, older, and far more powerful. A mother's voice. And when Elon Musk's mom finally speaks, it isn't to chase fame or explain success. It's to remind you of something you may have forgotten about yourself. She doesn't speak as a celebrity, even though the world knows her name. She speaks as a woman who watched a sensitive, curious child grow into a man the world would judge, praise, misunderstand, and sometimes ridicule. She speaks as someone who has seen fear up close, who has felt uncertainty in her own bones, who has lived through moments when the future looked anything but guaranteed. Her message carries weight not because of who her son is, but because of what she has learned by walking through life without shortcuts. And somehow, when she speaks, it feels like she is speaking directly to you. She talks about believing before there is evidence. About holding on when the world tells you to let go. About standing beside someone when their dreams look impractical, unrealistic, or even foolish. She reminds you that greatness rarely announces itself politely. It often arrives disguised as stubbornness, oddness, or an obsession that doesn't fit neatly into society's boxes. When Elon was young, many didn't see a future innovator. They saw a quiet boy, different, introverted, lost in his thoughts. Some saw weakness where there was depth. Some saw strangeness where there was vision. And this is where her message begins to touch you, because you know what it feels like to be misunderstood. She doesn't pretend the journey was easy. She doesn't romanticize struggle. She speaks honestly about hardship, about raising children with limited resources, about moving countries, about starting over when it would have been easier to give up. She speaks about resilience not as a buzzword, but as a daily decision. Waking up and choosing to continue even when the outcome is uncertain. Even when the applause is absent. Even when no one is watching. And in that honesty, her words begin to feel like a mirror. Because somewhere in your life, you are doing the same thing. Quietly. Without recognition, there is a calm authority in her voice when she talks about patience. Not the passive kind that waits for things to happen, but the active kind that keeps working while waiting. She reminds you that overnight success is usually a myth told by people who weren't there for the years of doubt, failure, and persistence. Elon's story, she suggests, is not about genius alone. It is about endurance. About staying with an idea long enough for the world to catch up. about being willing to look foolish today for the sake of something meaningful tomorrow. And this is where her message becomes deeply personal, because you too are waiting for something. A breakthrough. A sign. A moment when all the effort finally makes sense. She speaks gently about criticism. About how success doesn't silence critics, it attracts them. About how being different invites judgment, and how trying to please everyone is a sure way to lose yourself. She watched her son be doubted, mocked, and dismissed, not just by strangers, but by experts. People with titles. People with confidence. People who were sure they knew better. And still, he kept going. Not because he was immune to pain, but because he believed in the work more than he feared the noise. When she says this, it feels like she is reminding you that not everyone who doubts you is right, and not every loud voice deserves your attention. Her message isn't about idolizing Elon Musk. It's about understanding what it takes to walk your own path. She emphasizes values over validation. Curiosity over conformity. Integrity over instant approval. She talks about allowing children, and by extension adults, to explore their interests deeply, even when those interests don't align with what society expects. Even when they don't promise immediate rewards. She makes it clear that the role of love is not to control outcomes, but to support growth. To create a space where ideas can breathe. Where failure is not fatal, but educational. As she continues, you begin to feel something shift inside you. Because her words are not just about a mother and her son. They are about potential. About the quiet power of encouragement. About the way one person's belief can become the foundation for another person's courage. She makes you wonder who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. Or who might be waiting right now for you to believe in them. Her message stretches beyond fame and fortune and reaches into the simple, often overlooked truth that human beings rise when they are seen, heard, and supported. She doesn't shy away from fear. She names it. She acknowledges that fear was present at every stage. Fear of failure. Fear of loss. Fear of being wrong. But she reframes fear not as a stop sign, but as a companion on the road to anything worthwhile. She suggests that fear doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. Often, it means you're on a meaningful one. And this lands deeply, because you know fear. You live with it. You've postponed dreams because of it. You've questioned yourself because of it. Hearing her speak about fear with such clarity makes it feel less like an enemy and more like a signal. There is warmth in the way she talks about hard work. Not the hustle for hustle's sake kind, but the focused, purposeful effort that aligns with something you truly care about. She describes long hours, repeated failures, moments when nothing seemed to work. And yet, she also talks about joy. About the quiet satisfaction of progress. about the fulfillment that comes from building something meaningful, even when it's difficult. She reminds you that work done with purpose nourishes the soul in a way that comfort never can. As her message unfolds, it becomes clear that this is not a speech designed to impress. It's a conversation designed to reassure. She seems to be telling you that it's okay to take your time. That life is not a race with a single finish line. That success does not have one definition. That being true to yourself is not a weakness, even when it makes your journey lonelier. She speaks as someone who has lived long enough to see trends come and go, opinions change, and truth endure. She touches on kindness in a way that feels grounded and real. Not as a soft concept, but as a strength. As something that anchors you when the world feels chaotic. She suggests that intelligence without empathy is incomplete. And ambition without humanity is empty. Watching her son navigate immense power and responsibility, she understands the importance of staying rooted. Of remembering where you came from. Of treating people with respect, regardless of status. And in this, her message feels like a quiet correction to a world obsessed with winning at all costs. There is also a subtle reminder woven through her words about self-worth. She doesn't tie it to achievement. She doesn't measure it by applause or recognition. She speaks about worth as something inherent. Something you are born with. Something that doesn't disappear when you fail. She watched her son struggle, succeed, stumble, and rise again. And through it all, his value as a human being never changed. This is perhaps the most powerful part of her message, because so many people forget this. So many people believe they are only as good as their last success. As you sit with her words, you begin to feel less alone. Because her message doesn't place you beneath anyone. It doesn't tell you to be like Elon Musk. It tells you to be fully, courageously yourself. To honor your curiosity. To respect your resilience. To trust that your path, with all its twists and detours, as her message continues to unfold, it gently moves from reflection into reassurance, as though she senses the quiet questions forming in your heart. She understands that listening is only half of what you need. The other half is hope. Not the loud, unrealistic kind, but the steady kind that survives storms. She speaks about moments when everything seemed to be on the line, when plans collapsed and certainty vanished. Times when the safest option would have been to retreat into something smaller, something easier. And yet, she chose faith over fear, again and again. Not blind faith, but the kind rooted in effort, values, and persistence. She reminds you that strength does not always look powerful. Sometimes it looks like showing up tired. Sometimes it looks like continuing after disappointment. Sometimes it looks like standing alone with your convictions while the world moves in the opposite direction. She watched her son endure seasons when progress was painfully slow, when setbacks piled up, when public opinion swung wildly. Through it all, what sustained him was not applause, but alignment. He was aligned with his purpose. And she gently invites you to ask yourself what you are aligned with, because alignment gives you endurance when motivation fades. There is something deeply grounding in the way she speaks about responsibility. She doesn't glamorize ambition. She acknowledges that big dreams come with heavy burdens. Sleepless nights. Difficult decisions. The weight of knowing that your choices affect others. She watched her son grow into responsibilities that most people never face, and she understands that success is not just about reaching the top, but about carrying what comes with it. Her message to you feels like a reminder to respect the weight of your own dreams, to prepare yourself not just for achievement, but for stewardship. She speaks about learning in a way that feels refreshing. Not as a phase of life, but as a lifelong posture. She emphasizes curiosity, reading, questioning, and staying open to being wrong. She watched a child who devoured books and asked endless questions, and she never tried to silence that curiosity. Instead, she protected it. And now, she seems to be asking you what parts of yourself you have silenced to fit in, to be practical, to avoid judgment. She suggests that reclaiming curiosity might be one of the most powerful things you can do. As her words sink in, she touches on comparison, one of the quiet thieves of joy. She has seen how easy it is to measure yourself against others, especially in a world obsessed with rankings and visibility. She reminds you that every journey unfolds differently, shaped by circumstances, timing, and choices you cannot always see from the outside. Comparing your beginning to someone else's middle or end only creates unnecessary pain. Her voice feels steady as she tells you that your pace is not a flaw. It is simply yours. She speaks tenderly about seasons of invisibility. Times when you are doing important work, but no one seems to notice. She assures you that these seasons are not wasted. They are formative. They are where resilience is built, where skills are sharpened, where character takes root. She watched years pass before the world recognized what her son was building, and even then, recognition came with misunderstanding. She wants you to know that unseen effort still counts. That progress does not need an audience to be real. There is also a quiet emphasis on self-trust woven through her message. She doesn't dismiss advice or mentorship, but she cautions against abandoning your inner compass. She has seen how easily people can project their fears onto your dreams, how often doubt masquerades as concern. She encourages you to listen carefully, to learn from others, but to ultimately trust the voice inside you that knows what you are called to do. That voice, she suggests, is often drowned out by noise, but it never disappears. She reflects on failure with an honesty that feels liberating. Failure, in her eyes, is not a verdict. It is feedback. It is part of the process, not the end of it. She watched ventures fail publicly, spectacularly, painfully. And she watched how each failure refined understanding, sharpened focus, and clarified purpose. She wants you to release the shame attached to falling short. To see failure as evidence that you tried, that you dared, that you were alive and engaged with your dreams. Her message carries a subtle warmth when she speaks about love. Not romanticized, not dramatic, but steady and enduring. Love as support. Love as patience. Love as believing in someone's potential even when they cannot yet see it themselves. She reminds you that no one truly succeeds alone, and that allowing yourself to receive support is not weakness. It is wisdom. And she invites you to consider who you are walking alongside, who you are encouraging, who you are lifting up simply by believing in them. She acknowledges uncertainty as a constant companion in life. Even with experience, even with resources, even with success, uncertainty never fully goes away. But she reframes it as space. Space for possibility. Space for growth. Space for something new to emerge. She has learned that certainty can make you rigid, while uncertainty keeps you adaptable. And adaptability, she suggests, is one of the most underrated strengths a person can have. As she continues, her words begin to feel less like advice and more like wisdom passed down across generations. She speaks from lived experience, from watching life unfold in unexpected ways. She has seen that control is often an illusion, and that flexibility paired with determination is far more powerful. She encourages you to focus on what you can influence: your effort, your integrity, your willingness to learn. The rest, she implies, will unfold in its own time. There is a gentle insistence in her voice when she talks about self-respect. About not compromising your values for convenience or approval. She watched how easily success can tempt people to cut corners, to forget their foundations. She emphasizes that who you become in the process matters just as much as what you achieve. Perhaps even more. Because achievements fade, but character endures, her message feels increasingly intimate, as though she is sitting across from you, speaking slowly, deliberately, ensuring you hear not just the words, but the meaning behind them. She wants you to understand that life will test you, stretch you, and sometimes exhaust you. But she also wants you to know that you are more capable than you realize. That resilience is not something reserved for a select few. It is something you build, choice by choice, day by day. She talks about courage in a way that strips away the drama. Courage, she says, is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. She watched courage manifest not in grand gestures, but in persistence. In returning to the work after disappointment. In trying again when quitting would have been understandable. And she seems to be offering you this definition of courage as a gift, something attainable, something human, as this part of her message settles. It leaves you with a quiet sense of steadiness. Not excitement that fades quickly, but reassurance that lingers. A feeling that you are allowed to be exactly where you are, while still believing in where you are going. Her words do not rush you. They ground you. They remind you that meaningful lives are built slowly, intentionally, with patience and heart, and somewhere between her reflections and your own thoughts, a realization begins to form. This message was never really about Elon Musk's mom finally speaking. It was about you finally listening. As her message reaches its deepest place, it softens even more, as if she knows that what stays with you is not volume, but truth. She speaks now not about striving, but about becoming. About how life, in its quiet way, shapes you through moments you barely notice at the time. She has watched years pass, watched her son grow, watched the world change, and through it all she has learned that the most important transformations happen slowly, beneath the surface. She wants you to trust that something meaningful is taking shape within you, even if you cannot yet see the results. She reminds you that your story does not need to impress anyone to be valuable. Not every life is meant to be loud. Not every contribution is meant to be visible. Some of the most important work in the world happens in silence, in consistency, in choosing what is right when no one is watching. She wants you to release the pressure to perform, to prove, to constantly justify your existence. You are allowed to live a life that feels true to you, even if it doesn't look remarkable from the outside. There is a tenderness in the way she speaks about aging, about time, about the perspective that only comes from having lived through many seasons. She has learned that urgency can be useful, but peace is essential. That chasing endlessly without pausing to appreciate the present leads to emptiness, not fulfillment. She invites you to notice your life as it is now. The small moments. The ordinary days. The quiet victories. These, she suggests, are not distractions from your purpose. They are part of it. She speaks about identity in a way that gently untangles it from success. You are not your job. You are not your failures. You are not the opinions people hold about you. Those things shift and change. What remains is who you are when everything else falls away. Your values. Your compassion. Your willingness to grow. She wants you to build your sense of self on these foundations, because they are the ones that endure when circumstances change. As her words continue, she touches on forgiveness. Both for others and for yourself. She understands how heavy regret can become when it is carried for too long. How past decisions can haunt you if you let them. She encourages you to learn from what has been, but not to live there. To allow yourself to move forward without dragging old versions of yourself along. Growth, she reminds you, requires space. And forgiveness is what creates that space. She speaks quietly about gratitude, not as a forced positivity, but as an anchor. A way of staying grounded when life feels overwhelming. Gratitude, in her experience, does not erase pain, but it gives you perspective. It helps you remember what is steady when everything else feels uncertain. She invites you to notice what is already supporting you, what has already carried you this far. Even if the journey hasn't been easy, there is a deep sense of acceptance in her message now. Acceptance of imperfection. Acceptance of uncertainty. Acceptance of the fact that you are always becoming, never finished. She wants you to stop waiting for the moment when you feel completely ready, completely confident, completely certain. That moment rarely comes. Life moves forward anyway. And you are allowed to move with it, learning as you go. She speaks about legacy in a way that feels surprisingly gentle. Not about monuments or recognition, but about impact. About how you make people feel. About the kindness you show. About the integrity you live by. These are the things that ripple outward, long after you are gone. She has seen how achievements can be forgotten, but the way you treat others is remembered. And she wants you to understand that you are already shaping a legacy through your everyday choices. As her message draws to a close, there is no grand conclusion, no dramatic call to action. Instead, there is a quiet invitation to keep going, to trust yourself a little more, to be patient with your process. To choose courage, even in small ways. To believe that your efforts matter, even when results are slow. She seems to be telling you that you don't need permission from the world to live meaningfully. You already have what you need. Her final words linger like a gentle echo. Life will continue to challenge you. Doubt will return. Fear will resurface. But you are not starting from nothing. You carry experience now. Wisdom. Strength you didn't know you had before. And each time you choose to move forward, even quietly, even imperfectly, you are honoring your own journey. When the message finally settles, it leaves you with something rare in a noisy world: clarity without pressure, motivation without anxiety, hope without illusion, and perhaps most importantly, a sense that you are not alone in your striving. That someone who has seen the full arc of a life lived with courage is reminding you that your path, exactly as it is unfolding, is worthy, and in that stillness, you understand something simple and profound. This message was never about fame, or success, or even Elon Musk. It was about you remembering your own strength, your own worth, and your own ability to continue, one honest step at a time.